Hello, I'm John Garvin, artist, writer, and creator of video games. Today, I'm doing a short documentary that explores my experience with the AI art creation tool Midjourney, how I use it, what I think of it, and what I think its impact is going to be. However, I'd like to say upfront that I am not an expert on Midjourney. I don't know much about how it works or the folks who made it, except what I've learned online. So, if you'd like to learn more about the tool and its creators, there's a lot of information out there already. Nor am I an expert at using the tool itself. There are dozens of videos on YouTube dedicated to the art of writing Midjourney prompts. My documentary isn't one of them. Instead, I want to focus on my process and the things I've discovered during my hundreds of hours spent using the tool. Your experience may and probably will differ. And what was I working on during those hundreds of Midjourney hours? Everything. I consider AI an art tool just like 3D Studio Max or Photoshop, which I use for my cartooning, book illustrations, fine art cartoon paintings, and for video game development. It's this last category that I'm going to focus on today. As many of you know, I'm currently the VP of Creative at Lethos Entertainment, working on an IP I created and am writing called Ashfall. The early stages of any visual IP, whether it's film, comic books, or video games, are all about imagination and ideas, where I come up with characters, settings, themes, plot, and more. But I don't work alone. I've always had teams of concept artists who help develop all of the above. We're building an entire world from scratch, so everything has to be invented. Before I get into how I use Midjourney, let me go over how I work with a human artist. For Ashfall Environment Concepts, I collaborated with the very talented Marco Iazzi, who is capable of creating world-class concept art. My process, and again yours might differ, begins with the story and theme. What's it about? Ashfall, I knew, was going to be about climate change and how it would push humanity to the edge of extinction. I also knew it was going to be about mysterious energy fields I call the Trace, and on a much smaller scale, exploring the life of Ash Naranjo. The story was going to ask the question, what does it mean to be human? Once I knew enough about the story and setting, I could start collaborating with Marco. I always start with an art brief, where I spell out in writing in a very short doc as much as I know about the assignment. The location, setting, time of year, weather, descriptions of who lives there, their history, what's happened, and so on. An artist needs as much information as you can give them. Then after a conversation, if needed, they get to work. The process after that is a bit of back and forth between me and the artist. They submit sketches, roughs, or early color comps. I give feedback. Next, they'll turn in something more finished, and I'll give more feedback. This might take a couple of rounds of iteration until I have something I consider final. Here's the funny thing. Working with Midjourney is almost exactly the same process. The prompt is like my art brief, where I try to describe in detail exactly what I want, and the AI delivers something. I react to what I'm seeing and change up the prompt, being more specific, adding or removing details. In the end, working with the AI is a lot like working with human beings, especially in this day and age where many of us are working remotely and we don't have a lot of in-person contact. So, in my view, the process is very similar. But what about the results? My answer to that is, and again, this is just my take on it, in no way do I consider it to be a definitive judgment, but my answer is, it depends. First, I think it depends on how specific your needs are. In my experience, the more complex the image, the easier it is for MJ to get confused, to misinterpret a prompt, to focus on the wrong detail, or to just not get it. And there's some things, to put it bluntly, that Midjourney just can't draw. So this is Midjourney. It's in Discord, and it's a bot that you communicate with by typing /, and then it creates a prompt. And then you just type in whatever you want to say to it in order to talk to it. Lots of information out there about how to use prompts and words to use and so on. But this is how I've been using it for the last year or so, just to kind of give you an idea. I always start with the style of the image and then the content of the image and then the arguments like you can pass to it, like which version of Midjourney do you want to use, aspect ratio, and so on. So I've already typed in this one, which is kind of a first start at this order repository that I had already worked with Marco Iazzi on. And this kind of gives you an idea of the results you can expect from Midjourney. So it's not bad. It's given me pretty much what I asked for in terms of, I wanted it to be a science fiction, far future, and you kind of get that sense from the very sort of curved shapes and organic shapes. You don't see a lot of a squares thing here, and I think that's one of the things that Midjourney interprets when you say far future or sci-fi. It says, "Hey, don't use traditional architecture," which is fine. And then it says, "Okay, it's a library that displays holograms of extinct animals." So at this point, I would call that a huge whiff on the part of Midjourney. It either didn't understand what I wanted or I don't know. I'm not sure. It's just, I don't see any animals at all, let alone extinct. And I certainly don't see them in holograph form. I mean, I see nothing here. So, all right, here we go. So once I got rid of everything else that was confusing it, and I think this is kind of one of the things I learned about Midjourney very early on, is the more you try to cram into a single image, the less successful it's going to be because it tends to prioritize one element over the other. So when I was, when the prompt had it trying to do an oval shaped cathedral type setting with a library and books and whatever else, it just didn't do a very good job because it got confused by all that stuff. And now that I've said, hey, focus on the animals and the holograms, it did a better job of creating the animals. Now, here's one of the things that I think is really kind of amusing about Midjourney. It just can't draw animals very well, at least not version 5. It's like, I don't know what the heck this is, but it's missing a head. This is like, I don't know, 3/4 of an animal. This one's missing a leg. I don't even know what the hell that is. I don't know what this is. It's missing body parts. So it's an utter failure when it tries to create animals because it's just like, dude, what is going on here? And then here's the other problem. These aren't holograms. And now I'm beginning to realize that maybe it doesn't understand what a hologram is. And so that's kind of a problem. So it's got an image bank of all these animals or dinosaur images or whatever it's pulling from. And, like a regular artist would, but it doesn't do a very good job of, extrapolating from that and turning this into something that looks more futuristic. So it's trying to get its futuristic from the kinds of lights that are behind the animals, the way they're lit, and so on. But it's not giving me a holographic image. So again, this is the kind of thing where, man, at this point, I would probably just realize I'm not going to get what I want from Midjourney. And this is the kind of assignment that I think maybe after 1,000 images, you could get closer to what you want. And you would probably have to take a bunch of these and combine them yourself in Photoshop and then feed that as a seed image. This is another set of images that it finally got around to spitting out based on the first time I put in the prompt. And, you can see it's kind of a little closer, in the sense that very futuristic images. This one especially I like because it's got, lots of animals on display. So you at least get the sense there's something going on there. Let's take a closer look at that one and see what's going on in the image itself. Yeah, so again, we've got, what the hell are these? It's like you've got some kind of a big bear looking thing, but it's got, I don't know, like a giant overweight rabbit. These are just bizarre animals. And what the hell, and what's going on back here with these things that kind of look like, 18th century woodcuts, but they're, evidently extinct animals, holograms of extinct animals. Anyway, so good example, I think, of an assignment that Midjourney is just not going to do very well. And just for one last attempt, let's see if we can simplify this down even more and just get a hologram of a single animal. Let's try that. A hologram. Let's try to give it some more help. A glowing, transparent hologram of an extinct sloth. Let's see how it does drawing a sloth. And here we go. So it knows what a sloth is. It did a pretty good job creating a sloth. Again, these don't feel like, I feel like it's trying to do something funky with the colors and the textures to just to say, hey, this is a hologram. And I'm like, well, actually, no, it's not. You've got it in some kind of a glass cage or you put some blue or green light on it. This is definitely not a hologram. So at this point, what I would do is feed it an image. This is a pretty cool thing you can do with Midjourney is you just upload an image. So in this case, I've got this image that I just downloaded, a hologram of a lion, and I'm going to upload it into Discord. And now I can pass this into Midjourney. And you do that by just, boom, copying in the link, and there it is. Now it has this as a reference. Now let's see if it can actually do a better job of giving me a sloth that looks like a hologram. All right, finally, it's going to start working on something. I'm seeing a lot of blue in the early image, which is great. That means it did get the idea of what I was looking for much more clearly because I fed it an image that showed it what I wanted. And this is one of the things you just kind of have to do with Midjourney is if the more specific you want something to be, you really have to give it images that show it what you want. And I know this brings up all kinds of questions about fair use and ripping off other artists and photographers, etc. I don't prescribe to any of that because as an artist, I go online and download and use reference material all the time. I never copy something directly or use it directly, but I always use it as reference. So I honestly don't see any difference between what Midjourney does and what an artist would do. And, as far as I'm concerned, I have tons of my own artwork up online. If people download it and use it for reference, I'm perfectly fine with that. All right. So again, this isn't great. It kind of doesn't look like a sloth anymore. It looks kind of like a seal. So that's kind of a problem because what it did was it combined the shapes of this lion, with some of the things that, it picked up from the shapes of the sloth. And, the results aren't great. Again, it's got the hologram now, but it completely lost the sloth. So, man, what I would have to do is probably what I'd have to do is find a picture of what I wanted and upload that and turn it in, use Photoshop to turn it into a hologram myself. And by that point, man, you're putting in a lot of work. All right, so I'm going to try one last time to get what I want out of this thing. And now that I fed it that image, I'll keep that seed image. And I'm going to go back to my more detailed display of the setting that I want. And I'm going to use that and see if I can't get. All right, so here we go. It's already encouraging because I can see as it's developing the image that it is going with my image of the hologram. So it's making the animal way more important than in those first attempts. And again, I'm getting the sense that I'm in a futuristic space. It has pretty much lost most of the books in the library. It hasn't given me anything like what I asked for. It hasn't given me a mammoth or a sloth or a horse. It's given me a lion. Who knows what this is? But anyway, dude, it can't draw animals to save its life, in my opinion. It doesn't understand what a holograph is. So bottom line is, I'm not going to get what I want in this particular assignment out of Midjourney. And this is the kind of thing that you just got to learn. You got to learn what is Midjourney good at and what is it not. And generally speaking, the more specific you are, and honestly, kind of the more esoteric. Like if you're asking for things that are more common in everyday life, I think the tool just has a much broader library of images to cobble from. But if you're asking for things that are kind of out of the way, like a hologram of an extinct mammoth, you're going to get what you get. So that was a good example of how Midjourney's machine learning hasn't quite learned enough to be really good at certain tasks. Now, let me give you a couple of examples where Midjourney succeeds brilliantly. First, the AI can be an amazing writer's assistant. And no, I'm not talking about ChatGPT all of a sudden, which I consider to be the most polished, terrible writer I've ever seen. I'm talking about Midjourney and how it can help a writer visualize their ideas. Since I work in the realms mostly of fantasy, science fiction, and sometimes post-apocalyptic hellscapes, I'm obviously imagining people, places, and events that don't exist. Midjourney is immensely helpful for this. When writing the comic, for example, I used MJ to help me visualize characters, vehicles, settings, and more. And this is an example of where the mistakes MJ makes are actually helpful because they can spark new ideas. So many times the AI comes up with something and I'm staring at it in awe going, what is that? But that can be really useful as a brainstorming tool. In many cases, I'll pass these images that I've selected during my writing process on to the comic book artist because they provide a better idea about what's in my head than any description in the script can provide. For example, there's a scene in the comic where we're inside Ash Naranjo's home. We're 1,000 years in the future, and I wanted something that looked futuristic, but not cliched. Turning to MJ, the AI gave me a bunch of ideas as to what this interior could look like, and it helped make the scene grounded and real. Earlier, I talked about specificity, and this is a good example of its opposite. This space could have been anything. And if MJ can spit out enough images that are somewhere in the ballpark, I'll find something that works. Using MJ this way as a tool for visualization is a win all around. Most writers can't afford art assistants, so we're not taking jobs from human beings, which I'll talk about more next. And again, a reminder that I'm talking about my process. Obviously, studios like Pixar or Disney or others that are art first or where concept artists work hand in hand with writers, AI will probably be incredibly disruptive. But for me and many writers and other creators working alone in their quiet studios, Midjourney is a game changer. The old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, certainly holds true today. Here's another example where I think Midjourney is pretty successful. A few weeks ago, I bought a combat card engine for Unity and decided to create a prototype Asphalt card game. This is not an official Lethos release, at least not yet, just something I was having fun playing with. Here's the thing. Aside from a few concept pieces by Marco Iazzi, all of this card art was made using Midjourney. This is the kind of assignment, I think, that MJ excels at. Small pieces, strong themes, no specific expectations as to details. To me, this is kind of the definition of art for card games in general. Now, in my case, I'm not going to go out and hire a team of artists to create art for 62 cards for a prototype I'm just playing with. For one thing, that would be expensive. Art like that is probably $1,000 per card, if not more. And for another, it would be time consuming. We're talking months of labor by a team of artists. I made all of this card art in a weekend. Is the art as good as what a human artist could produce? Probably not. But I'll leave that up to you and just say, in almost all cases, it's better than what I could have produced, especially given the amount of time and effort that went into them. So, yeah, this is a good example, I think, of where there could be a lot of disruption in the art field. Illustrators of all kinds, books, comics, cards, calendars, and more could and probably will see AI become more and more prevalent, whether we like it or not. So, what's an artist to do with this AI revolution that's coming? My advice is pretty simple. Embrace it. Another thing that I discovered Midjourney is pretty good at is taking existing art and doing variations of it in the same style. This can not only be a huge time saver for artists, but again, it can help generate new ideas based on existing concepts. In this example, I took an asphalt concept painting of Eastern wasteland cannibals by the talented Max Costin, fed it into Midjourney, and it gave some ideas for variations. The results were great. Here, I did the same thing with a ruins concept done by Lemon Sky, a talented production house that did some work on asphalt. Again, Midjourney did a great job of keeping the style, look, and feel while giving me a bunch of variations. In this example, I fed MJ some samples from the Asphalt comic, and it was able to capture the comic's palette and style. Although the AI is a long ways from being able to do pencils the way Paul Pelletier does. Currently, copyright laws say that you can't copyright an AI generated image. I think this is a result of lawyers and lawmakers not having a clue how AI and artists can collaborate. Sure, if all you do is use the text prompt, then maybe Midjourney's output doesn't really belong to you, even though it was your idea, because you didn't actually do the work. But what if you fed it your own art, like this painting I did for Asphalt of Isla, Ash's mother, holding her newborn son up to an ash-filled sky? Using this seed image, Midjourney will create images for me that would be impossible for other artists to create. It becomes a form of my unique expression. How are the resulting images not copyrightable? And just today, as I write this on May 23rd, 2023, Adobe has announced the inclusion of Firefly in Photoshop, a generative AI tool that lets you expand images, create new elements, and so on. Does this mean that the artist can't copyright any image manipulated using AI? Or do they only hold the copyright to parts of the image? It will be interesting to see what happens in the next few years as AI gets better and more tightly integrated into the way artists work. In the end, my take is that AI isn't coming. It's already here. Whether we like it or not, it's going to become part of our lives, creative and otherwise. Machine learning algorithms like Midjourney are just going to get better and better. For me, having spent a lifetime learning and using new art technologies, I couldn't be more excited. Thank you for watching.